What's up, you guys? Teddy Striker here, and at UFC 325, Alexander Volkanovski dominated Diego Lopez, and he made it look easier than he did the first time. And this fight just really solidified the fact that I don't think we should be seeing undeserved title shots anymore. I mean, we saw it last week as well with Paddy Pimblett. He went in there with Justin Gaethje, and he clearly wasn't ready, and he got dominated for the most part. And honestly, it's just really annoying to see these fighters get opportunities. I mean, sure, they're exciting fighters, they get finishes, but the problem is they get pushed to the top too soon because the UFC for some reason is adamant on making stars, and they don't really need to force anything. I think most stars come naturally. I mean, you look at Conor McGregor, it was natural. It wasn't really forced. You look at Israel Adesanya, it was natural. It wasn't really forced. You look at Chuck Liddell, it was natural. It wasn't really forced. But now you see the UFC try to rush guys like Sean O'Malley, guys like Diego Lopez, guys like Paddy, but it's not turned out too well for the UFC now, has it? And that's because they simply weren't ready. I mean, look at a guy like Cody Garbrandt. When he got a title shot off beating, I believe it was Thomas Almeida, that was his only top win at the time. He went out there and he did his thing against Dominic Cruz, and he showed that he had the potential to be a champion. And maybe if he had a little bit more time to develop, he could have been a dominant champion, but he wasn't. And then you look at a guy like Sean O'Malley, right? A guy who has a no contest with Pedro Munoz, but then he gets to bump up in competition and takes on Petillon. And fair play, you made it really close, and you could argue that O'Malley won, you could argue that Petillon won, but regardless, it was still a really close fight that showed that Sean O'Malley was partially on that level. And then he goes out there and he beats Aljamain Sterling, and that's great. But then you fight a guy like Chito Vera, and then you fight Merab. Merab beats you, and then the second time you get an immediate rematch because the UFC thinks you're a star, but this time you get finished even worse than you were the first time. And then you bounce back and you get a guy who most of the top guys have already beaten in Song Yadong. And then you look at a guy like Kai Asakura. The guy is making his UFC debut, and he's getting a title shot against Alexandre Pantoja, and it goes horribly wrong for him. He gets submitted in the second round. He got dropped in the first. And then he goes out there and he takes on a lower level guy in Tim Elliott, and he gets finished again. And all his momentum, all his hype is clearly out the window because the UFC tried to make a star out of him, and it didn't work out because he wasn't proven and he wasn't ready for that top level. I mean, we just seen it with a guy like Patrick Mix, who was really dominant in Bellator, who had a great record and everything. He comes over to the UFC and he loses 2 fights, and now he's gone. Everyone was talking about him like he was going to be the next Demetrius Johnson or something. He really wasn't that good when he came over to the UFC. He froze up, and again, sometimes you don't want to rush these guys. You want to build them up slowly. And guess what? When you build something up slowly, not only does it make their eventual ascension and claim to the title that much sweeter, but it just makes him a better fighter. Like Khamzat Chimaev, for example, he got fast-tracked. He beat Li Jingliang, and then he took on Gilbert Burns, who was ranked number 2 at the time. And Khamzat beat Gilbert Burns, but he didn't get a title shot. He fought Kevin Holland, and then he fought Kamaru Usman, an older version of him, but he still had that experience from being in there against a former champion, and he fought another former champion in Rob Whittaker. And then when he got to the title, he made it look easy. He dominated Dricus du Plessis because he had that experience. He had that time to really grow and fight through adversity. There's many things that can go wrong for you in a fight. You might be sick. You might not be at 100%. So it's a lot better to experience these things and slowly and gradually increase the level of competition instead of right away being fed to the wolves. And a guy like Paddy Pimblett, I feel like he will never actually reach that top. I feel like he's got too many holes in his game that should have been fixed but haven't, because he just kept winning and he wasn't tested. And then he got tested against one of the top 5 lightweights, and it did not go his way. He went from fighting Michael Chandler, who really is at the lower end of the top 15. So in my opinion, he should have fought Chandler, and then someone near the top 8, near the top 9, near the top 10, and go out there and beat them, then fight a guy in the top 7, and then you can fight a top 5 fighter instead of just rushing. The thing about Paddy Pimblett is also he was fighting once a year, and that is crazy to be fighting once a year as a guy who isn't a former champion, a guy who isn't a main eventer, and a guy who's simply building his way through the rankings. Paddy Pimblett should have been a lot more active. He should have got a lot more miles on the road than he did, and he got found out, and I don't think he'll be able to come back well from this defeat. And same thing for Diego Lopez, to be honest. I think after the Volkanovski loss, he did well. He went out there and took out John Silva, but I felt like after that fight, he should have gone out there and fought Yair Rodriguez. I mean, where is Yair? Yair isn't doing anything right now. He's not scheduled to fight anybody. So I felt like that was a great fight. There was heat on that matchup. They don't like each other. And I think that's a matchup that Diego Lopez could have won. And honestly, that would have done a lot more for Diego Lopez's stock. It would have made him a better fighter. It would have made him an even bigger star. And it would have made the Volkanovski fight a lot more intriguing and a lot closer, because you go out there and you take out a guy who's got great footwork. Maybe, let's say you get a knockout. You knock out a guy that Volkanovski took to the ground. We can make something out of that, build a narrative. And then you go out there and you fight somebody else. Maybe you fight an Aljamain Sterling. Hey, like, he beat a former champion. Let's get him back in there against Volk. That's like 3 wins in a row. Then you have a much bigger fight. You have a much better product. And everybody wins in the end. Even if Diego Lopez loses, that makes Volkanovski look even better, because he beat a real established top contender. And if Diego Lopez loses, well, you're still really like top level. I mean, Max Holloway lost to Volkanovski 3 times, but maybe you lost in a much more competitive fight. Maybe you gave Volk a bit of a run for his money, and you get a lot more credit for that. And also, the last point I want to talk about is when fighters get rushed to the top, like, the fans start to see that, and it can create resentment for that fighter. It's like, hey, you don't deserve this opportunity, and we know you don't. And that turns into hate for that fighter. And then the fighter's like, hey, why does everybody hate me? Well, it's because of what the UFC's done. And I think the UFC's really got to stop this. I mean, they have the recipe. They have the formula. The UFC's whole motto used to be the best fight the best, we're not boxing. And it was perfect. It worked out really great for the UFC. And one last final example I want to talk about is Darren Till as well. Like, the guy beats Wonderboy Thompson because he missed weight. And then he goes out there and he gets like torched by Tyron Woodley. And then he goes on a bit of a downward spiral, and he's never really able to get that momentum back. And again, another failed start that the UFC rushed. I think they've got to stop this. It does a lot more damage for these fighters than the UFC realizes. And the sooner they realize the amount of damage that it's doing, then the sooner we can get better products, and we can actually get some natural stars in the UFC. But let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think? Do you think the UFC should stop trying to manufacture stars? And what do you think they should do? But thank you guys for watching. God bless. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.